Welcome everyone to my 7th podcast. I am very excited. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share to help the algorithm bring it to more people, which changes lives and brings Mashiach. And 2 disclaimers. The first disclaimer is that this is catered to a Chabad crowd, or at least religious, Jewishly religious. And also disclaimer, we're not trying to bash anyone. This is help to make the world a better place, to make better the system, and to bring Mashiach. So joining us today we have Reb Shmuel Neft. Very, very excited to get him. So, Reb Shmuel, tell me about yourself, about what you're doing now. I know you're in JRCC. How did you get there?
All right. So I am a shliach here in Toronto. You mentioned JRCC, working primarily with Russian Jews. We're here for our 5th year. And thank God, I'm saying year after year, including a good year and a half of COVID ups and downs, we've seen a lot of our work paying off, which has been really great. It's quite a ride, but we're here, we're doing it.
Let's take a step back. How did you end up in JRCC?
That's a good question. So the truth is I've been doing shlichus work in various capacities with Russian Jews since I was 19 years old. It started with the Mivtzoyim route every Friday when I was in learning in Morristown, to 2 buildings with Russian Jews. I would go visit them every Friday. It was actually no. Sorry, it didn't start with that. It started with being a camp counselor in a camp called Yeka in Ukraine, a camp for Jewish boys in Ukraine. Not like any camp, which most camps here would pay you to come and work. We actually fundraised to be able to go and work our tails off. But that was an amazing experience. It started with that, and then it was in Morristown and Yeshiva in Zal for 2 years, and was visiting Russian homes, Russian-speaking homes every week. Went to America Shlichus, which for those that are frum but do not know the Lubavitch slang, is the program where Lubavitch or Yeshiva Bachrim get sent to different places to help volunteer in the community and support the local Jewish communities. So I did that. I was there 6 times, and when my wife and I got married, we knew that we wanted to we had the skills, which consists of both language, but I think even more importantly, the language is knowledge, understanding the mentality, to work specifically with Russian Jews. It was a question where we had different places that we had in mind that we were going to go. We both shared a dream of moving to the former Soviet Union somewhere, but none of those dreams actually worked out. And I guess for the better, because anywhere that we wanted to go to was either occupied by the Russian army, bombed by the Russian army, or in Russia itself, which my wife told me that she would have never survived. So, thank God for that. How I ended up here in Toronto,
KGB.
Yeah, right. My boss, Rabbi Zaltzman, has a nephew, and that nephew is my best friend, and he put a good word in for us. And we came and visited, checked it out, and actually, not we visited. I visited, checked it out, and I think it was really Hashgacha Pratis that ended up, bringing us here. That it kind of became pretty obvious that this is what we needed, and this is the place that needed us the most. And that's what we did. We came here 5 years ago, and that's how we ended up here.
Interesting. So it sounds like from all your experiences, everything had to do with Russians, but at first glance you don't seem so Russian. You have a perfect English accent. So what's your, I guess now I was taking a step further back, what is it that you seem to always go after the Russian Jews, even though you could seem to be very well with American Jews also?
It's a good
English
question.
speaking.
I'm saying the truth is that I grew up in a mixed marriage family, mixed marriage in the sense of my mother is a Soviet immigrant, so that side of the family was in many ways, fresh, more or less fresh off the boat. Where the other side of my family is, they've been American Jews for 5 generations. But it's the language, and it's the language, and like I said, it's the culture, it's the understanding of the way people think, the way that people from that part of the world think, the way that they operate, how to speak to them. It happens to be that I'll be very honest. I have the sprach both with Russians and Americans. I can tell you right now, I don't have sprach.
That's my question. So why is it that you seem to always go after Russians more than English speaking?
The short answer is because the Russians are far more. I may sound terrible, but because I guess it's a limited audience, so I guess I can be more open about it. The Russian speaking population is much more genuine than American Jews, far more than, let's say, South African Jews. Like I couldn't live around South Africans. Like, no offense to anybody from South Africa. One of my closest friends is South African, but I'm not the right guy for that job, right there. And you see the people that work with South Africans. And you have that here in town. You have Rabbi Mrs. Plotkin, and the founders of a lot of Markham. Markham is a place where a lot of South African immigrants came over the years, and they have that sprach. I don't. American Jews, I do. I'm saying because I came from that background. But it's much harder to work with them. It's much harder in the sense where you have to be a little less genuine, just like they are a little less genuine. You have to kind of water things down a little more, and there's a difference between being a Chabad rabbi and trying to get get Jews involved, but the Jews are Jews are longtime members of a conservative synagogue or Reform temple, and they're not interested in hearing you, knowing you, whatever, because they're already part of a community, and that's it. Versus people that are completely disinterested from Judaism and not part of any community, and you're the first Judaism that they've ever really seen.
May I stop you for a second? So it sounds like you're saying, at first, because you said South Africa, I got a little, a little startled, because I heard South Africa is a very nice community, but then I realized that you're more focused on, I guess, the non-religious community, or at least they've had a conservative background. But if they have a conservative background, what's the difference? Where they came from? Like, if Americans came from conservative background, you can have that.
I'll tell you, it's a mentality thing. It's a squareness. Squareness mentality thing. In Kazakhstan, for example, I learned when I was a bacher. Let's go back to that time. When I was going to the Russian-speaking countries, I got immersed in the culture, in the sense where it's not just you're a second-generation American Soviet immigrant and you talk Russian with a heavy English accent barely because your grandmother did you the service of talking to you in Russian when you were a kid. This is learning how to make it over there, how to interact with people, how to get things done. I'm saying, I bribed police officers when I was in Kazakhstan because that's what you do over there, right? Americans don't get that. It's a different mentality. It's a more relaxed attitude in the sense of the rules and the regulations, and also in general in life. I'm saying they're much more genuine. You can tell certain people, you can go as far as telling them to their face, without mincing words. Whereas with other people, it's impossible. I'm saying with Americans, with Americans it's impossible. With Canadians, it's even more impossible. South Africans, for example, they have a beautiful community. But if you see my colleagues that are in South Africa, they're very stately, very established, very rabbinic types of guys. A picture like me, if I were to move to South Africa, who am I? In other words, South African Jews want established leadership. They want a rabbi at least with graying hairs. So that's kind of, and it's because I straddled both worlds in my life, so I'm able to communicate with both worlds in one sense, but also to appreciate that I actually really much am built for a job like this one. Instead of working with regular, Canadian Jews on a day-to-day, because for me it's easier. Not that it's easier for me. I feel like I'm able to accomplish more with people again, that instead of being trapped into their I'm doing this and this is the way I am, sort of mentality, to instead work with people that are trapped. They trap themselves in such a mentality, but for no reason. In other words, they'll tell you, okay, I'm not interested in going to synagogue. I'm not interested in this, that, or that, or this. But you can, but despite all that, you can still go and have a coffee with them or have a beer with them, and then get to know them, and then slowly have some sort of influence or build a greater connection. Whereas I have friends that go to places and they're told left and right by people like, I'm not interested. I don't want to, like, I'm not interested in people that are not even interested in having a relationship. I go to the Reform Temple. I've been a member there for 30 years. Not interested in even knowing who you are, right? Whereas here, people realize that the boundaries that they set up, at least with regards to Judaism, are very superficial. Superficial in the sense that they're just self-made boundaries. So I find a lot of pleasure and accomplishment in working with people with this mentality. And the truth is that not just the people that actually themselves immigrated, but their descendants are very much, anybody that's listening to this that will say, well, okay, how about the next generation? Like, they're all American, they're all Canadian. Mm-hmm. Aren't they assimilated? And the answer to that is hard no. It's a hard no. I can't emphasize enough the fallacy that a belief like that it contains, because knowing from the ground, Russians have a tendency to stick together with their own, even if they don't even speak the language. I mean, we're talking about people our age, born in Canada. Their parents spoke Russian to them as kids. They barely speak Russian or speak a crappy Russian. It's not about the language, but the mentality. They always stick together. You see that actually in Israel. You have in Israel, it's very well known in Israel. You have many different communities that are known, like that's the Russian place, Rishon LeZion or Or Akiva, or all these places, because they really have a bad time assimilating, for better or for worse. I think there's a certain elitism to it. And you see that here in Toronto. I'm saying Russian Jews, they're saying in general in Toronto, and Jews all stick together. They're all along one Bathurst, but the Russian Jews stick together even within that one Bathurst, because you have different Russian speaking groups. You have different Russian restaurants, and you have Russian banquet halls, and they're all I always tell people the fact that someone that's 22 years old, born in Canada, goes to public school with everybody else, but that knows by heart the words to Russian pop music, that means that means that we have a job to do. I'm saying it means that we have a job in the sense that our subpopulation is not mixing in with everybody else, and they need their own catered attention, and that's what we bring.
In what way is it unique that it's not like other Chabad houses? It's not like a English-speaking Chabad house, especially when you're in a Canadian/American English-speaking place, and you have Chabad houses which are English-speaking.
I'll tell you like this: if you get someone into your doors already, right? A Russian-speaking Jews here. The idea of men and women praying separately is a complete non-issue. Okay, there's no. In fact, I know most of the people I know here grew up secular. If you were to tell them about the way things work in a Reform temple, they'd be like, "What is that?" Right? They're like, "No, not for me. Like I'm cool here." So once you get them into the door, and you tell them, okay, this is how we do things, right? We pray separately, men and women. We do this, we do that. It becomes there's much more. People are much more not that they're receptive. They don't know anything else, and they're totally fine with it. Oh, that makes sense. Men and women praying separately makes sense to me, saying Kaddish for 11 months after someone passed away makes plenty of sense to me.
They basically seem to just blindly follow. Once they're in the door, they just take in everything.
Not blind. I wouldn't say blindly, because Russian speakers are very, very intellectual. In other words, a lot of if things don't make sense to them, they're not going to do them. They're not blind. They're not blind followers in that sense. But also they're not. It depends. They're not. They don't have preconceived notions about Yiddishkeit. They don't. They don't have. In American Judaism, in American Jewry, you have. Are you Reform? Are you conservative? Are you Orthodox? That doesn't exist in Russians. Right. See a Jew is a Jew, right? And so that division of the legitimization of the different rungs of the Jewish ladder, like I'm Reform, it's the same thing as you're Orthodox, where we all make our life decisions. No. That's not the way it works. The Russians are a Russian Jew will tell you, I do not keep Shabbos. I eat and very much enjoy bacon. I will drink completely not kosher cognac. I will go to Russian restaurants and eat crabs and God knows what. But you will never catch me dead in a Reform temple. Right? You will never catch me dead in a Reform temple. My child will have a proper bris at 8 days. I would never see myself not getting married under a proper chuppah with a kosher wedding. I would never see my son not having a bar mitzvah in an Orthodox synagogue. Right, so I would never see myself not sitting shiva for 7 days.
What's the common denominator between all the things that they for sure would do and for sure wouldn't do?
When it comes to, it all boils down to being genuine. When they hear about Jewish practices that are, so to speak, watered down or catered to the needs of modern people, it's because old style Judaism is archaic and irrelevant. That to them smells not genuine, and when the first smell of not genuine, they're out. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's funny. There's a family in Crown Heights, well known in Crown Heights families. The last name is Rogatsky. Okay, the parents are they're saying that the father is already alav shalom. A few years ago he passed away. The parents were Russian Bali Tshuva that became from, we're talking 40, 50 years ago, back in the day. And all their kids grew up in Crown Heights. They're all very interesting, colorful family. They're in construction there. So I have one of them, who I think now lives in the Five Towns, doesn't live in Crown Heights anymore. So I came up to him, actually met him. I actually met him in Toronto at a wedding and told him about the story. He had no recollection, but when I was walking around Crown Heights for a couple months before we moved here, collecting good tzedakah for our shluchas, and I went up to him in 770. It was actually they were still saying Kaddish for their father, so we're talking about a little 5.5 years ago. I came up to him and I asked him if he would support us in our shluchas, and he gave like an $18 donation or whatever. But he says, I want to tell you like this. Most important advice that I could give you, and the most important thing you should always know on this shluchas, because he asked me, what are you doing? Where are you going? Toronto, Russians, whatever. Is Russians need MS. He said the first hint of ingenuousness, of not genuine, they're gone. You've lost them. And it's so true. And so when you're able to sit at the Shabbos Kiddush and feel like you can, really push a guy in their Yiddishkeit and not have to feel like you're tiptoeing around their snowflakey, very sensitive needs, it's a completely different world, and I'm built for it. Now it comes with its challenges.
Oh, that's what I was waiting to hear. What are the cons?
The cons are many. The first con is good luck getting them through the door. And
why is it harder than any other? Obviously, you're saying that in a way that it's harder than
because they're not interested in Yiddishkeit. These are people who, if they themselves were brought up in the Soviet Union, they were deprived of any knowledge or appreciation for Yiddishkeit. A lot of them lived.
Well, what about those who grew up here?
1 second. So a lot of them, the people that grew up in communism didn't have Yiddishkeit, and then they moved to Israel. A lot of them, like in Toronto, a lot of the Russians in Toronto here lived in Israel. When the 90% of the Russians that moved to Israel, including a lot of those that are still there, had an extremely terrible experience in Israel, that they somehow fairly or unfairly in different contexts associate with Judaism. Now, can you imagine, and I totally get them, you imagine your entire life you are basically persona non grata, whether you're a kid in school or in university, or if you got to university, many universities wouldn't take Jews, or in your workplace. You're always the Jew, you're always isolated, you're always meant to feel different. And then, 1990, the Iron Curtain comes down, you finally have a chance, and in masses, you and a bunch of all your Jewish friends and neighbors all pick up and go to Israel. And in Israel, you got no money, you got no housing, you got nobody that cares for you, because you're not now you're not the stinking Jew, you're the stinking Russian, right? And you got to build everything from scratch. And you were professional in Russia, but now you're a janitor. And unfortunately, when it comes to things like getting married, the Rabbanut in Israel is very, very harsh with Russians, and it's a really, really bad experience. It's something that we here try to really, really undo, because it really, really rubs people the wrong way. I have cousins that will still tell you about how terrible their experience was of getting their paperwork done to get married. It's awful. It's a necessity, but it's awful. Then they come to Canada, and it's funny because they'll know that if there's anything that they would ever need in Judaism, JRCC is the only place for them to go. But don't touch me. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in coming to this. I'm not interested in being part of this. I don't want to go to shul. I don't want to think. That's a very big challenge. So you're not fighting against the member of a conservative temple, but you're fighting against someone who is genuinely disinterested in the Yiddishkeit and many people don't believe in God. Many people are just completely not, totally not with it, to the point where I'm saying assimilation in the Soviet sphere is so bad that I met Jews over there, I met Jews here. It's so funny that you have the same thing between Jews that literally live in a Ekvelt village in the middle of Kazakhstan, that all they know is that their mother was Jewish. Nothing else. No other Jewish, external Jewish connection. You can have the same thing here at Bathurst and Steeles. Same thing, right? Except for they've got 10 shuls in there, and within a 2-kilometer radius, and every supermarket that they shop at sells kosher, has a whole 2 or 3 kosher aisles. That's very, very hard. So you have to get creative. I saw this spending time with shluchim in Ukraine and Kazakhstan and in shluchim, and also Russian-speaking shluchim in here in America and Canada, that you have to get to people in a different way. I'm saying you have to, like a JRC, like we deliver holiday packages to everybody. That's one way. Someone will tell you, I'm not interested in going to shul. Okay, so come, let's have a beer together. Can I just be your friend? I'm not looking for anything. I'm not coming to you for money. I'm not coming to you to get you to come to anything. Let's just have a kesher. Let's just have a relationship.
Is that the hook? Or I was what are hooks to get them someone who's totally not interested?
That's a hook.
That sounds like you would do to anyone. Is that harder or unique in any way by a Russian?
Russians are much more open to these non-formal ways of gathering and spending time with each other. Go to banya. You tell a guy, what's the harm? Let's go to banya together. Yeah, no problem. Anytime you want. I found that non-Russian Jews are very cold, and they're cold. They're just cold, and so they're not interested in whatever you want from them. Just get away, right? Whereas here, if you understand the culture, if you understand the way they communicate, so you can get to them. You can get to anybody. I really think you can get to anybody. I think that what the challenge is back to being genuine. You have to be genuine. If you're not genuine, you have to be genuine about the fact that you want to actually have to get to know them. You want to be genuine about anything that you try to throw on them. Okay, you have to be genuinely interested in whatever they're ready to say to you, and they'll be receptive.
What about someone who's already somewhat religious, Russian? Is there still a difference the way you interact with him?
Yeah, Absolutely.
In your Chabad house, obviously, I'm talking about.
Absolutely. You can tell a guy that's already in the fold. Here you can call if he's doing something wrong in his Judaism. Easily call him out. Like, buddy, that's not Judaism.
So
I have this conversation with people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That's not Judaism. You want to know what Judaism is? I have no problem telling you. This kind of sprach you can't. It's very hard to have with Rav, with most people out there. But for sure, so once they're already in the fold, especially if you're the one that brought them in the fold, whatever you say goes.
Wow.
Great. Again, genuine or not, right? The genuine thing always sticks. But if once they're on the inside, and if you're the reason why they're on the inside, you can tell them straight to their face. This is the way it works. This is good. This is not. Hey, I think you should do this. Hey, I think you should. I don't think you should do that.
It's interesting because I just interviewed Daniel Yakubov, which is Sephardi Bukharian, and we also, I don't know if we use the word genuine, but that idea, and he said that he said specifically with religious Jews that it's merachik them when they're not genuine, or like they're not they're too exclusive. So it sounds, is that similar, or especially when you have a Russian Sephardi, is that like takes it to the next level?
What do you mean exclusive?
Like I'm better than you.
They like that?
Are they okay with that? It sounds like they even want that. No, they want you to be like rabbi.
Yes and no. I think that's already a generational thing.
Oh, interesting.
I think that's already a generational thing.
So the older generation likes it,
I think so. Yeah. The younger generation doesn't. The younger generation, especially. Well, so again, we're talking. You're still talking about in the realm of the religious people.
Mm-hmm.
I think no. It is generational, but I think it's less obviously generational when you're already quote unquote in the fold. But yes, definitely. If you're not in a position of authority in a Russian's mind, then you're nobody.
But that's only the older generation.
The older generation and also the older generation and their offspring. In other words, the people, the next generation that they're already bringing up, more traditional and more religious, it's kind of the same thing. But still, they will look up to you. But they'll find somebody else that speaks their language still. That kind of gets them. You see that as well. I'm saying, the idea of CBD, for example. Here, you have the young Lubavitchers in general, Lubavitchers are very comparable to Russians when it comes to mentality. So you have the guys that they'll respect everybody, right? But they're not interested in going to shul and Chabad gate because that's not doesn't speak to them. Right, but they respect everybody. They not just respect. Maybe they'll listen when told or when asked. But when it comes to day-to-day Judaism, they're still going to look for something that speaks to them more. That's what it seems like to me. I could be reading it wrong. When it comes to the non-religious crowd, that generational divide, I think, is much more obvious. And that's part of secular culture in general. I'm saying, like anybody, in the world. I'm saying, the younger generation knows it all, and and anybody that's older than a certain age is already out of touch.
Right. So, being that this is a religious podcast for religious people, how is your interaction with religious people here? Because even though you are a shliach, but most shliachim are not in a religious community, and this is one of the most Toronto, Vaughan is one of the most religious communities. So how's your interaction with the Anash over here?
Well, by the way, I should correct you. The implication that even though it's for this podcast for religious people should be, even if you're not a shliach. First of all, you should aspire to be a shliach officially. If being a shliach officially is not in your purview, then being a shliach in whatever sphere that you are in. So I think it's all relevant. That's just me sticking myself in there. I don't, we're gonna tell you. It's nice. I guess it's comfortable to be able to, work your tail off for more hours than the average full-time employee works, and give your life away to shluchas, and also be able to drive your child to cheder in only 5 minutes.
Was that a factor that you needed to be in a religious community, or you didn't?
It wasn't for me. It wasn't necessarily a factor. It's definitely. It wasn't a make or break. We were okay with being in more of a periphery situation, where not necessarily out there, but not necessarily in the heart of a bustling, established Jewish community. It's nice, I guess, it's nice, it's that. Look, I'll tell you a story. When there's a family that used to live in Morristown. They don't live in Morristown anymore. They used to have Bachrim over every Shabbos for meals. And they wouldn't just have all the Bachrim. They would have a certain group that they liked, like the Baal Bas liked to hang out with. So I was zeicha to be one of those that he liked to hang out with, and I'm saying his nephews were in yeshiva with me, so they would bring me along, and then he'd invite me himself, and so we ended up becoming very close to the family, and spent a lot of time in their house, and they actually hosted the Shabbat brachas for us after we got married. So I was on the phone with him. I think it was either right before. I think it was before we moved on shlichus, or right after. I'm pretty sure before. And he said like this. He said, shluchim that move out to places far away. So, if they're, some people are so far away that their kids, are on online school, and they have kosher food that they're ordering direct to their house. Nowadays, it's much easier than it used to be. But let's say, you're in a place where you decide if shluchim here that will drive an hour and a half each way to take their kids to school, and all the kosher shopping is here in Toronto. So he said when you factor in all the time you're spending on driving to and from school, and on and in the shopping trips, and then the general trips to the community for different things, you're spending so much time on that stuff, you have so much less time for your shlichus. Whereas he said, and this is in those days, I was thinking to myself, is it more of a thing to go on shlichus where you have to suffer more, basically, or not?
No, it's up to your personality.
It's also up to your personality, but he said what the mila is that when you're in a place like here in Toronto, and cheder is 10 minutes away, and kosher food is literally across the street, so you don't have to spend any. You got all your time is kol kulei shlichus, which is so true, right? And even I see as my kids grow older, so I spend more time schlepping them to different places, school, daycare, etc. And I even then, like comparative to others, I've got so much more time to sit or move around or whatever it is that I'm doing as a shliach. I have more time to learn Chitas and Rambam every day. I don't stand up to do anything. I try to keep this religiously. It doesn't always work until I finish my daily shooting. I have a whole list of them. There's something that didn't come naturally. It's something that's actually very unnatural for me. In fact, in yeshiva, I was very, very good with keeping up with my daily shooting. But when I would leave yeshiva to go home or to go America Shlichus, the whole thing would implode. Here, I have the luxury of being able to be able to have my kids all dropped off, and by 9 o'clock sitting downstairs with a cup of coffee and getting through all my shurim before 10:30, 11 o'clock. That entire part of my day, the morning Judaism, is gone. It's done, and all I have is until 6 o'clock. It's kol kulei shlichus, and then most nights after the kids go to bed, I'm either learning with somebody or I'm in my office doing work if I need to. So if you think that I'm not putting in the hours, I'm definitely putting in the hours, a lot more than the hours. And that's the luxury that I have, being able to live here. So that's the good thing about it. It's also nice to know local about what I'm saying. But I'm not saying that
by the way thing. You don't go out of your way for the most part.
Correct. In fact, I wasn't really until only a couple of years ago, well after COVID, so maybe even late 2021, 2022 was when I even minimally started kind of mingling in the Lubavitch community. It took me a while. I would go to mikveh but like I was busy. I was out. Had my own minyan here, so I was never davening Chabad gate like I do now. I didn't really get to know that many people, so much in the beginning. But it's definitely a nice thing to have. There's nothing. I'm saying it also has a lot of its drawbacks, but when you're the only show in town, you don't have a bunch of nosy Jews sticking their noses down your back. But everything comes with its benefits and its costs. But it's a nice thing. It's a nice thing, and I think the most valuable part is what I said with the timing. That I'm able to spend minimal in the sense where I don't have to spend any more time on family and personal needs. I'm able to spend much more time than many other shluchim out there on shluchas.
It's definitely a plus. I mean,
huge plus.
Yeah, 100%. I was more asking that in a way of like, that's a plus. I only see pluses. I'm thinking, are there any cons with living in the?
Like I said, Jews living in a place with a ton of Jews means a lot of politics, a lot of anxiety, a lot of bad blood that I can't stand.
You're not really into it. I mean, you're just like out of it.
The problem is that I am naturally into it. I don't know. I always loved the hawk and the politics. So I was always that kind of person. But then when you're a bacher and you're talking about, you're bad mouthing the entire world, it's fun. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It's a game that has no bearing on anybody or anything. When it becomes big boy life, real life, and people are not just shechting the entire world at their own Shabbos table, but they're actually influences the way that they actually interact with other human beings. That is really, really, really toxic. And so I've been sucked down that rabbit hole before. And I needed to, I worked on myself to be able to pick myself out of it. But it takes a lot of endurance to be able to be above the fray. There's a lot of fray. Come on, every Jewish community's got its character with the different things, and in the sense that I do envy, colleagues, friends that are even somewhat more out. I have a friend on Shluchas in a suburb of Orlando. Okay, Orlando's got kosher restaurants, Orlando's got kosher food, mikvah, everything, right? But he's a half an hour away from it, in his own little bubble, where there's no one's nagging him. Why don't you have a minyan every morning? Or why don't you have a minyan every mincha? Or why are you doing this? Or why are you doing that? Or I don't think that's the right thing. Or that, and in community WhatsApp groups with all their shtick, that I would love, right? Theoretically, if just speaking from just about specifically that aspect, it is very frustrating to live amongst Jews. That's why I don't find it so much of a vacation to go to places like Miami. Everyone wants to go to Miami. What is Miami's just more heat and more Jews. Like I need a break from my whole life is Jews, right? I just need some time to myself sometimes, So I don't want to sound like an anti-Semite, but
right. No, I think we get it. Shifting the topic again, focusing on more the religious system. I use that word. So you grew up
not in the religious system.
Not in religious. Okay, so could we speak about that and how you ended up in the religious system and how was that?
All right. So I'll go all the way back.
We're going we started.
We got to go all the way back.
Back.
All the way back to the 90s. My mother, like I said, was a Soviet immigrant. Where they moved to a small town in central Pennsylvania. We're actually going there soon, because as soon as my grandfather's yard site, he's buried there.
First year?
Yeah. And so the only shul in town was the Reform Synagogue. So that was my grandparents coming out of the Soviet Union, they, unlike many people, because they came out in the 70s when it was very rare to come out, and those people were much more excited to get involved in Jewish community stuff. Whereas Jewish community stuff, synagogues, no matter of what type, because they felt deprived. Whereas the later generation that went, let's say, to Israel in the 90s, they got turned off by Judaism and everything Jewish because of the Jews themselves, and no matter what, they weren't really, no one was running to get involved anywhere. So they had one synagogue in town. It was a Reform synagogue, and they went all in. Saying like, my mother and my uncle went to Hebrew school, and my grandparents were volunteers in the community. They got very, very involved. But that was the only Judaism that my mother knew. My father, like I said, is on my father's side, I'm a fifth generation American. My ancestors came to America in the 1890s. Okay, so we're talking about over 130 years ago. And not only they came to America, they came to the same city that I was born and raised in, which is pretty cool. Everyone stayed in Pittsburgh. We are so. Our family is so Pittsburgh. It's like more than like we're old Pittsburgh. Embedded. Most of my even extended family still lives there. Like extended, like distant cousins. Pittsburgh is the place where American Reform Judaism was founded. You know that? Wow. Pittsburgh Platform. The Pittsburgh Platform was the conference, the meetup, I think in 1897, if I remember correctly, where they opened up the first Reform shul in America. And so Pittsburgh is actually home to one of the biggest, at least used to be. Now it's pretty much dead. One of the biggest Reform synagogues in entire North America, and my grandparents were members there. My great grandfather, one of my great grandfathers was everyone was members of different big either conservative or Reform temples. I don't know if I'm sure you've heard of Temple Sinai. What is it, Mount Sinai?
Yeah.
They got shot up a few years ago. The famous Temple Sinai.
Temple
Sinai. Temple Sinai, with the famous picture shooting. So my great grandfather was a member there. So that was Judah. So we're talking about cold American, exactly everything that I told you, the stereotypical cold American Jew. That was my upbringing on that side of the family. So grew up, as secular American Jews. We were members of a conservative synagogue. Went to shul twice a year. Went to Sunday school. And it's kind of cool how everything works out, because my father in Pittsburgh they have something called Mitzvah Day, which is like this. I think the Federation of Pittsburgh puts it together, where all the synagogues and communities come together and they do Tikkun Olam stuff. So my father was volunteering for the Bethel synagogue Mitzvah Day, crew, and happened to meet the local shliach at the event. And kudos to him, saying that local shliach married me off. Saying my parents still go there. Kudos to him. He went straight for he felt like it was kedai to go straight for the advertising, and told him about the camp in Israel that summer. All the summers I would go to JCC camp with all my friends. That was the socially accepted. We were until I was 10 years old, we did what was socially accepted. Sunday school, JCC camp. There was a Federation-owned overnight camp that everybody went to. What? As opposed to not doing those things, right? Anything else was not acceptable. And the truth is that once we started doing things that, first of all, me as a 10-year-old, I felt like I was when in the summer I didn't go to the Federation overnight camp. In the summer that I stopped going to JCC day camp, I remember the shame that I felt, and not the social pressure was enormous. That's what conservative synagogues are today. They're Jewish social clubs. In fact, when we left the conservative synagogue, my parents lost all of their friends, all of them, every single one of them.
Sounds like a cult.
It is a cult, but that's funny because they accused us of going to a cult. That was that. So my parents decided, you know what? It could have been because it was a lot cheaper than JC camp was really expensive. So they took us out for JC camp, I think, just for only half the summer, and sent us, which is just up the road, to Chabad camp, Camp Gan Israel. So that's the first time I remember seeing. I was 10 years old. We're talking the summer of, I think, 2006. Or actually, no. No, I don't. I think it was summer 2005. I think I was 9 years old. The first time I saw a frum Jew close up, like actually spoken to a frum person.
Wow.
And I don't, for all, it's funny. You look back and now you're shliach. You know what it takes to make a 2-week camp in Israel, and it's like everything is like it's a chassidus Malav Malka. And I can't say that I felt like an elite summer camp, but it was a great program, and there were great kids and great counselors, and we had a good time. At the same time, I felt FOMO because all my friends were going other places, but for the experience that it was on its own, it was great. So Camp Gan Israel turned into Sunday school, and Sunday school turned into fully moving into Chabad. And so Chabad had, Chabad was the Chabad house there is a pretty flowering little community. It was in this little house. So it was not what I was used to. Instead of the idea of instead of this massive synagogue with a bunch of wasted space that no one knows what to do with 2 different sanctuaries, one that we use on Friday night and one we use on Saturday morning, and of course a synagogue with a microphone and everyone and their girlfriend sitting all together. So it was a far cry from what I was used to. It was weird to have a synagogue in a house. I remember the feeling that it was like. I remember thinking to myself, like, how does that? We switched over to Sunday school, and at that point, once my parents put us out of Sunday school, they basically realized that why should we pay membership to the synagogue anymore? So they stopped paying membership.
Conservative.
Yeah, and that was it. We became ostracized.
Everyone was on board. Are you the only sibling?
No, I was a sister. My sister was too young to really be on board or not. I was not necessarily on board. Because of this, I wasn't on board.
Wow,
No, I wasn't. Actually, I wasn't on board.
Because of your friends?
I lost all of my friends. I lost them, or at least the people that were purportedly my friends. But I think for my parents it was much harder than when it was for me. I only realized this.
It was harder, but they wanted it more.
They wanted something that.
Well, what hooked them?
Being genuine.
But your father is not Russian.
My father's not Russian. My mother is, and my father is actually, him specifically is an anomaly in our family in general. Politically, always saw differently than all of our relatives. When it came to Judaism, also, I'm saying now my father learns Chitas Ram every morning. After goes to Kill every morning and learns Chassidus. Davins and Chitas and Rambam, okay, where my father never realized, but he was always open, much more open than anybody else. They wanted something. My parents always the story they always say was they once asked me what Shavuos was, and I couldn't, and I was and I couldn't answer the question. I didn't know what Shavuos was. It was going, but and I actually remember this. I was in the car. They asked me what Shavuos is. I'm like, I have no idea. So they're like, why are we sending you to this? So they thought to themselves, why are we sending them to this Sunday school? They're not learning anything. So it wasn't they're not interested in. We didn't start going to shul on a regular basis right away either. And they wanted, just from the educational standpoint, they wanted that their kids got a Jewish education that had substance to it instead of a socially accepted Jewish education that had nothing to it. Right? I can't even imagine how many friends from my upbringing are either A, weren't halakhically Jewish to begin with, or B, are married out. I'm assuming it's at least 50%.
You bring a point from that, or you just stam a fact?
I'm just saying, what kind of Jewish education is that, right?
Right.
So Hebrew school turned into my father starting to put on tefillin every day, and then it turned into going to shul on Shabbos. Shabbos, saying, I think until today, no, they have they have a minyan there. So there's no, again, the benefits of living outside of the sphere. All people want from you is a Shabbos morning minyan. Friday night you don't have to do. Shabbos afternoon, no need. Sunday morning, I think because the rabbi was saying Kaddish a couple years ago, so he needed a minyan Friday night, Shabbos day, Shabbos afternoon, Sunday. So they do that now because of that kind of as a hemshech. I honestly I do envy people that a little bit from the Yetzer Hara. I do envy people that don't have that can daven Kabbalah Shabbos in the living rooms. I
No,
guess
but why, if you could expand, like
There
that's
wa-
only the starter, no?
like I said, people are in their box. In other words, there was no market for a Friday night minion all the years. In other words, the fact that he had to start one for his own need and people were willing to come to help him out.
So it just
right?
continued that way.
Correct. And the Sunday minion now they have because of that, and people enjoy it, right? But it started out of a need. So it's going to shul on Shabbos. I remember that when we started to go to shul on Shabbos every Shabbos in the spring, and I remember that I would go to for the first few months. I don't know. I have no idea why my parents let that fly, because the conservative synagogue would never fly. I would go to shul in like a polo shirt and shorts, right? But the cool thing is that no one ever said anything.
That's how you dressed in the Chabad shul?
That's how, yeah, I was a 10-year-old, 10 or 11, maybe 11-year-old, 10-year-old kid. I can remember the tangibly feeling that no one's judging me. Whereas if I went to shul on Shabbos, to the conservative synagogue, it's not inappropriate, but no one said a thing. I have no idea why my parents let me do that, but I did.
You still don't know?
I still don't know.
Do you think that was a good thing?
Sure, I think for me now to look back at that, because let me tell you something, a lot of my perception of shlichus, general, is based on the shlichus that I grew up in. Very much. I'm saying for me, there's one archetypal Chabad house in my head that is my default for what a Chabad house looks like. That's Chabad of South Hills in Pittsburgh. That's the way I was brought up. So for me to have that experience, for sure, because then I can tell people that make faces and come to me and say that someone's not dressing well. But to say, you know what? I don't care. Now, I do care. Everything is an educational experience, but you making faces and calling people out, they're coming to shul for the first time, not dressed the way you think is the right way, or the way the third thinks is the right way, that's not an educational experience. What I went through was an educational experience. In other words, at some point, my parents said to me, you know what? I think it's better to wear shul clothing to go to shul. Or, you know what, maybe not even that. It could have been because the other kids in shul were all dressed up, like wearing Shabbos clothes. Even the non-frum kids, right? I grew up with a circle of non-frum kids that were in shul every Shabbos our entire childhood.
Wow. Did you feel forced?
Sometimes. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But the shul crowd was always a really fun crowd to hang out. And the rabbi's children were also the rabbi's children I'm still friendly with today. So that was all, that was all an experience. And then in 11, so from going to shul every Shabbos to then my parents koshering, we did a renovation in our kitchen, and they decided, you know what, if we're putting in a new kitchen, let's start keeping kosher, which I was very against.
Why? You were a kid.
Yeah, but I liked having cheeseburgers.
Oh, I thought you meant koshering the kitchen part.
Yeah, no. I was very against having a kosher kitchen. What do you mean? Your freedom is. But then another Ashkacha brought this moment. So my father.
It's interesting. I always heard the other way around, where the kid wants what the parents don't. It's just like the one. Especially what you were.
I
10,
liked
11,
like
12.
I remember, for example, first Shabbos I kept was totally not intentional. It was, and when I say first Shabbos, I mean it was the first Shabbos I kept from Shabbos morning until Havdalah. It was when basically the rabbi's oldest son, was a year older than me, had a bar mitzvah, and they did it in a hotel that's mamash a few minute walk from my house. So that was the first time that my father and I was 12 years old. So Shabbos morning we got up and we walked to shul, and I would go to shul on Shabbos wearing a yarmulke and tzitzis, that's Hebrew school, Hebrew school. Kind of, that was that would rub off on us. There was a small tekufa in those years that I was wearing tzitzis around, but then I got over that. A lot of kids have that when they go to Chabad Hebrew school. They decide they want to wear tzitzis, and then they move on. But we went to that hotel, and I spent the entire Shabbos. Not only did I keep the entire Shabbos, I spent the entire Shabbos with Yankel Rosenblum, who's bar mitzvah, and his entire class. So I'm spending an entire Shabbos at 12 years old with a bunch of Lubavitch kids. A bunch of them I know until today, actually. It's hilarious. I'm friends with, in touch with. But I wasn't, and that was really awesome. It was really cool, and I was really, really upset that we had to leave Motzei Shabbos because I was having a great time with them. We verbranked, literally verbranked.
12 years old.
Yeah,
Verbranked.
yeah.
What are you talking about?
We had a class. I don't know, but we had a verbringen, and I was really into it. But I wasn't necessarily into at that stage. I wasn't into life-altering changes, like keeping kosher. Like the food in the school cafeteria was really good. And okay, they're a child. Children in general don't want to be forced to do something against their will. You find that in the frum circles as well, right? Anybody that's listening to this that has a child that may have struggled with kashrus in their teens, to be told that this is the way we do things. That's not education, right? So look, I have no choice, but I went with it, and kasher in the house turned into another. So another brought the story. My father worked in a bank, in a branch of the biggest bank in Pittsburgh. That was. Actually, first he worked at a branch of the bank, which is really cool. It was right next to the training facility for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So a bunch I love football. I still love football, even though I don't watch it or pay attention to it. But I love football. I played football as a kid, and I love the Steelers. And so my father would come home and say, Jeff Reed, the starting kicker for the Steelers, was in the bank today. He sat down. We had a meeting today, and all these, and I would beg him, get them to sign stuff for me, get them to give me an autograph, something. He's like, no, I can't. I don't work. It's policy. I can't do that. But anyway, so then my father was moved to a different branch, which is right next to the Jewish community. So he started having these from customers. So one of the clients that he had, is this lady. Who's a caterer in Pittsburgh, I think she's still in business, whose kids were involved in NCSY in Pittsburgh. And so one day my father came home and told me, there's this group, NCSY, they meet in Squirrel Hill, which is the Jewish community. It's about half an hour away from where we lived. I signed you up. Okay. Whatever. You signed me up to a group. I didn't know anybody. Nobody. And that winter, I think it's probably, winter, I think of 7th grade or 6th grade. I think it was 6th grade, winter of 6th grade. So I'm 11 years old. I went on a Shabbaton to Detroit. Long story short, I got very involved in NCSY. So much so that they have junior NCSY for middle school, and they have high school, senior NCSY. Right, I was an anomaly in the sense that most of the kids in NCSY were coming from more unorthodox families, still struggling with Yiddishkeit just the same. We're going to day school for the most part. Whereas I was coming from a community completely far outside of the Jewish community, but also from a public school. But I got involved. I got really involved, and I got this became my social scene, and less so than at school.
What was it that really attracted you?
Nice people, genuine people. Seriously, I kind of worked my way up the social ladder.
You mean both the what do you call them, students, or the students and the staff, or just
the kids and the staff? Yeah. The staff was just one couple who was an amazing couple. They're no longer the head of the NCSY in Pittsburgh, but I became a ben bias in their house. Very, very close. And it was because of the rabbi made decisions that would pull me into the fold despite, so to speak, like the rules of the way things worked. For example, coming out of 8th grade into 9th grade, I was put on the chapter board. which was unheard of because the chapter board was only people that were more involved and already involved for at least a year into high school. So he did things deliberately to get me in, and I went all in. I'm saying I became my main friend circle. I started spending a lot of time. There were weekly meetups, and then there were different events, and there were Shabbatons 3 times a year. And by the time, and then in addition to that, because I started becoming friends with people, so I started going to their houses for Shabbos. Okay, so that was when I started really experiencing Shabbos fully, from Friday night to Saturday. Now, the truth is that my friends didn't really keep Shabbos themselves so well. That's number one. Number two, I also didn't keep Shabbos so well, even after I decided I wanted to start keeping Shabbos. Okay, so, unfortunately, in modern Orthodox circles, Shabbos is especially back then, when texting became much cheaper. I don't know, you're a little younger than me, but when I first got the function to text on my cell phone, so I had a cell phone when I was 9 years old. I was able to text maybe when I was like 13 or 14. Okay? Until then, a text message would cost 25 cents a piece.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. And so when texting became mainstream, so Shabbos became less mainstream amongst non-Orthodox kids. It was really a struggle that everyone had. But I would go to spend Shabbosim in the Jewish community in Pittsburgh. And it became not just a here and there, but it became like once or twice a month I was gone. And at that point, it rubbed off on me so much that I decided to keep Shabbos in general. Now, can I say it would only be a couple of years until I fully kept Shabbos. But you know what? I must say,
time, for sure.
It does take time. Although my parents were very, very against it and were overwhelmed with, whatever. I did it at 14 years old, and I consider myself from 14. And I, throughout high school, I picked up in my Yiddishkeit, and with time, I also worked my way up in the social ladder in NCSY. In those years, on a side note, I also kind of didn't like Chabad very much. It was really cool to be modern Orthodox, to be able to. What is modern Orthodox? Modern Orthodox means you kind of keep Yiddishkeit, but then you're also watch movies, hang out with girls, listen to Beyonce, whatever it is. That was much more relevant than, Chabad. So Chabad became archaic and kind of out of touch. What's cooler? From friends that are super with it and are all, into whatever's popular, versus Lubavitch kids who who don't have a TV, don't know what movies are, don't know what pop culture is. So I gravitated very quickly to modern Orthodox. At the same time, I also had a friend from NCSY. He now lives in Yerushalayim, beautiful family, that had left the system after 8th grade, left the Lubavitch system in Pittsburgh after 8th grade. So I also would hear about how, about not great things about Lubavitch from there as well. NCSY, modern Orthodox became relevant. Chabad became irrelevant. And so for when I was like maybe 15, 16, I was like, still go to shul on Shabbos with my parents, but I was already modern Orthodox, which Elon Gold, Elon Gold, the comedian.
Yeah.
So there was a bit that he did. That I saw. There's a real video, like 30 seconds. So he's like, there's a real meaning behind modern Orthodox. Modern Orthodox translated just means less Orthodox. So. Yes. And it's got this whole bit where he's like, but it's so weird. Why only with regards to Orthodox do we use the word modern instead of less? Why don't you don't see like someone sitting at the table and someone and someone saying that you're modern. So you're sitting at a date with a girl and you say to her, "Yeah, you're modern, pretty." He's like, that doesn't make sense. He's like, how does it work with Orthodox? Anyway, that was a funny bit, and that's true. Modern Orthodox, in those, unfortunately, because of their system, their educational system, and I only understood this now, being after getting out of it, is that the modern Orthodox educational system has a lot of work to do, and it's not just the system; it's also the families. Modern Orthodox. I had friends, modern Orthodox, great people, great families, hair covering, tznius is not a thing. So it's very confusing. That's my discontent with modern Orthodox already now.
I wanted to ask you, so, I mean, specifically you, but you can also say in general how you feel modern Orthodox is that. So do they want to be Jewish, like religious?
So here, this is what I learned after. So after being introduced to modern Orthodox, then I ended up getting more and more involved, and then seeing the other side of modern Orthodox, which is basically modern Orthodox is a spectrum. Modern Orthodox is a really, really bad term because it's very, very generally used. Because you have the more yeshivish from modern Orthodox, which when I say modern Orthodox, I mean Zionist, working university graduates. Okay, but they are far more yeshiva centric in the sense that the from values are much more conservative versus the same word modern Orthodox, just like less Orthodox. So it's.
Are there any boundaries to modern Orthodox?
Not really. From
what
I understood, not really. No.
Any avera like in some kula to it? Like what is the boundary? It doesn't sound like there's a boundary.
Look. It's kind of do
whatever you want.
It's a thing that exists in American Jewry. As back to that conversation where yes, you can kind of do whatever you want. And so friends. I became friends with NCSY is broken up into regions, and in each region you have different cities, and then the cities they get together a few times a year for different regional events. So I made friends in Columbus, I made friends in Cleveland and Detroit. These are all the Cincinnati. These are all the cities in our region. I actually used to go there. We go to Shabbatons, and I also go there myself just to go hang out and spend time with each other. And what I saw is that a lot of families, they just picked and choose what they were doing. Like I don't know, I don't know. They to each their own in that sense. But for example, in Cleveland, there's two educational systems in Cleveland. Cleveland's a sizable Jewish community. We're talking about well over 50,000 Jews. No, probably maybe 100,000 Jews in a big frum community, and they have two schools. They have Telz, Yavne, which is the very, very, very yeshivish, very frum, and you have Fuchs Mizrahi, which is the day school, which is a mixed school from kindergarten through high school. Modern Orthodox B'nai Akiva type Zionist, very Zionist, but not this. The schools. The fact that the schools mixed is one issue. The fact that the families that send their kids to that school have varying different levels of values. It creates a lot of confusion. A lot of kids that I knew from Cleveland, either disavowed modern Orthodoxy and went more right, or just went off the derech.
It's not sustainable.
In my opinion, no. In my opinion, not that it's offensive to anybody. I don't like here. I try to avoid sending. People ask where should they send their kids to school. For me, Netivot is not an option. That's the modern Orthodox school here in Netivot, and then the B'nai Akiva high schools. Even though here the B'nai Akiva high schools are separate, but still, I'm saying I know people that come out of there, and there's the modern Orthodox system. Look, every system's got its issues, but the modern Orthodox system, you have a lot of kids that ride through the system without being able to read basic Hebrew, let alone keeping major mitzvahs. Forget about Chol Yisrael. I'm talking about Shem Nagia, that kind of basic stuff. Shabbos, right? Texting on Shabbos was amongst us teenagers was not abgefrekt. It was you would keep Shabbos.
What's the absolute no? Like don't marry non-Jewish. Like where's the
No, the absolute no is that we keep Shabbos, probably Taras Mishpacha, Kashrus.
There's so many levels to keeping Shabbos.
Correct.
So
there's levels to everything. Correct. And imagine what kind of confusion that gives to your children when you do this but not that.
I mean, you can apply it to all levels, even
you can apply it to all levels.
Chabad, there's many different levels.
You
of
can
keeping
apply
something.
that to believe me. Anyway, so the point is like this. I ended up getting more involved. I was going to Shabbos away to the community. I was riding my way up the leadership rungs in NCSY, both locally and regionally. It was finally for the first time in my life a social circle that I actually felt like I was on top of the world. Like people actually wanted to be friends with me, and I wasn't trying to be friends with them. I ended up going to it. When I was 15, I went to an NCSY program in the summer to Israel that was made for less religious kids. And then 2 years later, when I was 17, actually the first trip I ended up getting kicked out of, which is a funny story. A couple of us ended up buying a bottle of alcohol from a store in Tzfas. We're all the way at the end of the road, the main road. Yeah.
Yerushalayim.
One in the old city where the yeshiva Gedol is in.
Yeah.
So all the way at the end,
Yeah.
where it takes a sharp turn. There's a corner store right there. There's an old guy with a.
Tailors?
I don't remember exactly. It's right there. I know that I can tell you. The old guy. There's an old guy with a beard, big beard, and a big yarmulke. Sold us a bottle of vodka, and we drank it like in the hotel room. And then I found out about it, and yeah, it was a very, very, very the worst rule. The worst thing you could do on that trip was to buy alcohol. So we did it, and we got kicked off. But anyway, the point is that 2 summers later, I ended up going to a summer program that NCSY does till this day. It's called NCSY Kolel, and it's a yeshiva's kayetz. So it's the first time I spent quality time around 5 towns, New York metro area from kids. So this is already a different world, right? We're talking in town already. I don't know how I ended up. The funny thing is, I ended up getting put in a room with a bunch of 5 towns kids that all went to the same high school, and the high school is DRS, which is an all boys high school. So it's already a different level of modern Orthodox, and it's a different level of being. I never. And surprisingly enough, they took me in with open arms, and I fit in with them really, really well, very quickly, and I became really good friends with these guys. We're talking about the typical 5 towns, like Jewish.
Explain to someone who doesn't know what's the typical 5 towns.
New York attitude.
Okay.
More more right-leaning, modern Orthodox, very yeshiva style of talking, but everyone they wear polos and kippah sruga, but they talk very yeshivish. Mm-hmm. One of the kids in my bunk in the room that we were staying in, his father's the principal of DRS, which is the big, more again right-leaning modern Orthodox school in the 5 towns. So, guys that probably have only Chalav Yisrael in their house because that's like what's available there, right? I'm saying necessarily they always ate Chalav Yisrael, but these guys have New York Jews, right? Mm-hmm. But it was there, and for the first time in my life, and that summer was transformational. Personally, on a level of frumkeit. It was there that I started actually davening every day, 3 times a day, and davening full Shabbos with tefillin. It's not something I always did. Like there was a time where I was keeping Shabbos, but I wasn't putting on tefillin every day. It was kind of funny how those two things can be mutually exclusive. But so davening through. So I started davening 3 times a day, tefillin, the entire Shabbos and tefillin. And it was there that I, for the first, besides all the other experiences and learning Gemara, it was the first time I sat down and learned Gemara, which is really cool. We had a very, very beginner level Gemara share.
After being from for 4 years.
No, being from for 2.5 maybe years, right? Still new to the block, but this really got me because once I got in with the 5 towns guys, I'm in, right? So it was there that I started learning Gemara. I started davening 3 times a day, and it was the first time I opened up Tanya.
It was just casually in the yeshiva?
Yeah, so this yeshiva that we were in had a set of Tanya, lessons in Tanya. Now, how did I know about lessons in Tanya? Because my mother had a friend from the Chabad house, from the Chabad community back in Pittsburgh. She had a friend that left town, and she was downsizing, and she left a bunch of her books and a lot of her Jewish books, and she left a whole set of lessons in Tanya that sat in my room collecting dust for a bunch of years, but I saw it every single day. So it's funny because you're finally in a setting where you're starting to learn, and you see on the shelf lessons in Tanya, and you think to yourself, I know that book, what's in it? So I started learning Tanya, and I learned it with actually, it's the first time I learned Tanya. It's the first time I learned the Kutei Maharan, Rabbi Nachman, which was also really enjoyed learning it. So I learned those two things with two different chavrusas every night for a month, 6 weeks, or whatever, however long we were there for. That was besides the fact that we were in Eretz Yisrael, and being in Eretz Yisrael is a fantastic experience on its own, and especially at that age. And something clicked. After that, I came back, and then I flipped. I don't know how to explain it otherwise.
There's no logic to it.
No. I came. Let's see. I was 17 years old. 17 years old. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the summer before my senior year of high school. Yeah, the summer before my senior year of high school. Okay. I was at the same time. Okay, so basically like this. Before that summer, I had applied to all the universities I wanted to apply to. Okay, including Yeshiva University, which my parents were really against.
Because it's Yeshiva?
Yeah. They thought that Yeshiva... Most people, by the way, many people don't even know what Yeshiva University is, even though its academics are actually very, very, very up top. Okay, so I applied to universities, and I got into all of them. But it was a big question of... Basically, when I got back from that summer, I had this existential question of, am I going to go to secular university, possibly after a year of yeshiva in Israel, and then just be like everybody else, or am I going to go to yeshiva in Israel and then go to yeshiva university and get really serious about my Yiddishkeit? And the latter was what I decided. So everything changed. So everything flipped. After that summer, everything flipped. I was no longer planning on going to secular university through hell or high water. It only took several months for my parents to actually accept that. I was going to go for a year to yeshiva, the typical modern Orthodox gap year yeshiva, for a year after high school, and then I'm going to go to yeshiva university. And then besides for that decision, I also flipped in Yiddishkeit. My netiya towards Lubavitch began.
How?
By learning Tanya. I don't know what it was. Tanya, learning Chassidus started to get to me, and I started realizing, oh my gosh, Chassidus is amazing. Rebbe's kind of a cool thing, and oh my gosh, one second. I have a Lubavitch family right around the corner from me that I know. So all of a sudden went all in on Chassidus. And when I say all in on Chassidus, I mean I was learning the Rabbi Rosenblum, our family rabbi. I told him that I want to learn Tanya now, and I want to learn the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And we did it. Sat with me, I think, once a week for quite a while. At the same time, I also started a Gemara Charusa with someone in the Kelo in Pittsburgh. So there's a little Kelo in Pittsburgh, and so I was learning Gemara. I was learning Tanya, and I was learning the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And at that point, I went all in on Chabad, but then I started to basically straddling two worlds. So, Rabbi Rosenblum, I'm sure, was very happy to see me get. He
didn't ever nudge you to get more involved.
Not in that. No. There was no.
Find that as a good thing.
Yes, there was no forced Judaism or guilt Judaism or pushing Judaism. Saying when I started keeping Shabbos, he was like, "Wow, that's." I remember his reaction. Wow, that's beautiful.
He's just like,
everything
I'm there when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's you kind of took that to your shlichus now, that style.
Very much. Very, very, very much. Totally not pushy. Not to my parents to keep Shabbos, not to my parents to keep... Everything that we did on our own. Just the arum. It shows you that the arum, the environment, has such an effect on people. When you create a room of loving, accepting, caring, then people really, really, really gravitate to that. But my like, I don't know if you ever met my dad. My dad's like same old him, but he wears a gartel when he davens, and he, like I said, learns chassidus every morning. Religiously learns chassidus every morning. He does Rambam and Mishnayos every single day. We're talking about a guy that doesn't know how to read Hebrew, right?
He doesn't.
Nothing.
When you say same old him, it's like the same old.
Same old guy, yeah. The same, my same old father, but like, and no one pushed on him. The only thing that was pushed on him, and it wasn't by the shliach, it was by somebody else, was Rambam.
Because.
You know who Mendy Kunyan is?
Of course. Oh. Okay.
The famous Mendy Kunyan, the three. So we ended up at the same Shabbos table one year by Kiddush HaShulchan. I was in Zal in Morristown, and Mendy Kunyan's like, "Hey, do you learn Rambam?" I'm like, "No."
He's your father.
Yeah. So he's like, and I'm like sinking in the back of my chair. I'm like, don't, like, oh my gosh. Like, no. He's like, well, after Shabbos, make a subscription to Chayenu. And that's it. I started being a subscriber to Chayenu. We're talking about 8 years ago.
So, okay, now it makes it more interesting, because now if we can zoom out a little bit, and because that's a very, very big point about it's a whole derech of educating kids, doing shlichus. Are you someone who's pushy, or are you someone that just? It's more of like.
I'm not someone who's pushy. Maybe it's because of my personality. I do have a shy personality in the sense that I do have certain discomforts, and pushing myself out of my comfort zone is tough. And sometimes I see people really want, like I was in Mexico a few months ago with my wife, and we were in the Chabad house, and see these Israeli bakim that are there for the year, and they're sitting with random Israeli guys off the street, filling every day, Shabbos, like, and they're like pushing Yiddish kind of these guys, and like, how do they get the inner fortitude to be able to do that?
So do you think it just depends on the personality?
Depends on the personality.
So it's like two totally opposite ways, and they're both valid. But
depends on the personality. It depends on the personality, but also depends on the environment, and it also depends on the worldview. I'm saying it's for Israelis to push Yiddish kind of random other Israelis is totally normal in their culture. For Russians, again, to push Yiddish kind of Russians is much more normal also. To push Yiddishkeit on American Jews is a destined failure. Mm-hmm. So we were very much influenced by the Arum, and so here's where it really gets interesting. It began to create my I stopped shaving at 17 years old. In fact, I only now just sent in my passport to get renewed. My passport from that year is like my little teen mustache and like a little like scruffle on the. So like once I started walking around with like what's it called, awkward Lubavitch facial hair, that's when my modern Orthodox Arum started to question what I was up to. Seriously. And so I was straddling these two worlds within Frumkeit of still had a lot of good friends, modern Orthodox, in the NCSY circles. That year I was on the regional board of the region of Central East and NCSY. So I was at the top. That was it. I made it to the absolute top. I was elite in NCSY. Talking about a random kid from a public school who by accident went to one Shabbaton, and then it turned into a whole. And I was super involved. In other words, that was my downtime was leadership. The chat, local leadership, regional leadership. So I was at the top. But at the same time, this guy at the top is doing what's not acceptable, which is kach sich and chassidus and having a beard, right? So for them, it was like, why do you need to do that? You're focusing on externalities, and why you should learn the Gans Torah before you start learning. So there's all this stuff, and I was getting it. So I was my personality type, which just still exists today, is the more you push me on one end, the more you end up pushing me towards the thing you're trying to push me out of. So the more pressure I got from that NCSY crowd. the more netiya I had towards Lubavitch. But at some point I was straddling. So by the time so that year was crazy. So that year was, I made a commitment to go to post high school yeshiva. I made a commitment to go to yeshiva university. Okay. Then halfway through the year I graduated high school because I couldn't. I at that point in my life, by November of the school year that year, I could not walk into the building of my public high school again. I couldn't. It was done. I was so out of it already. The goyim and just I did not fit in anymore.
You're basically religious at that point, so yeah, that's really hard.
I was quite religious at that point. I used to think I was the super religious at that point. So I graduated high school early. Whatever. I for the next half year I found a job whatever. I was working and I was working from before I graduated high school. The cool thing is actually I found a new job working for a Lubavitcher, really chassidish Baal Asik, himself a Baal Tshuva, but he passed away very tragically recently. He had a really big hashpah on me, just seeing Chassidish Yid, the way Chassidish Yid lives his life. Was really, really fascinating for me. And then by the time that summer came around, so the whole next half of the school year I was working. The whole summer I was working, and I was going to Shiva. So by the time everyone was graduating high school, I was like, I had this massive dilemma. Either I'm gonna go now. I really basically had to go all in Lubavitch, because otherwise, this trying to straddle this mono-orthodox kind of lifestyle of Goyish music and hanging out with girls was not stemming with my newfound Lubavitch identity anymore. Mm-hmm. It just wasn't. So that summer, I spent Shabbosim with, and now I would go away for Shabbos to my Lubavitch friends in Pittsburgh, right? And I would daven as much as I could in the Lubavitch Center in Pittsburgh, and then that end of that summer, I went to yeshiva in Israel. Now, the yeshiva in Israel that I went to is a fantastic yeshiva. It's known to be one of the more hardcore yeshivas in the post-high school non-Orthodox yeshiva world, in the sense that it's very demanding. And the Rosh Yeshiva is either famous or infamous, depending on the way you look at it. So he's like the Panovich version of the Rosh. Okay, unfiltered, very, very, very opinionated, very, very straight to the point. I'm saying a lot. Like, you couldn't record some of his shurim because you'd get in trouble. Mm-hmm. He's infamous for that. And they're famous for that. The basic rule, so the yeshiva is interesting in the sense that it's an interesting gather of Frumkeit, because it's Litvish and very Zionist, and also very not Litvish, because it's got I think it's a brilliant way actually to make yeshiva for kids from mono-Orthodox high schools, because mono-Orthodox is this massive wide spectrum, right? And you have the kids from the 5 towns that go. There's different schools in the 5 towns. You got DRS is the guys only school, and then you have Hafter, which is the guys and girls school. In the same neighborhood, a lot of kids know each other, but a completely different gather of Yiddishkeit, mm-hmm. all within mono-Orthodox, right? So, and you have MTA in Washington Heights, in Manhattan, which is a boys' school, and you have Kushner in New Jersey, which is a mixed school, and all the guys from all these different places, and then not even talking about the out of town people, but it was mostly 5 towns, and mostly New York metro area chevra. The way they built this yeshiva is that they have a whole spectrum of different staff, between full-time staff and also like volunteer people that come to learn with Bachrim in the evenings. You have everything. In other words, you have. I'll tell you. I'll put it like this. The Rosh Yeshiva would say, Yitzchak Rabin Olav Shalom. I had a teacher that once said Yitzchak Rabin Yimach Shemai. Okay, all in one yeshiva, and within the Zionist outlook of things, that's a completely different
Opposites.
Right? There was a Breslov guy that would come learn with certain Bachrim with Breslov Chassidus, and you had one of the teachers that I gravitated to in general, who gave us Shir Tanya, by the way, a couple times a week. He was from the Litvish system, but he was a mushpa of Karlbach, but he's very, 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 like Litvish minded, but very Chassidish. So like very much into Chassidus.
All over the place.
Yeah, all over the place. Certain Bachrim gravitated to certain Bachrim gravitated to different teachers.
It's nice. It sounds like there's different paths you can choose in yeshiva.
Very. You could have walked out that. First of all, you could have walked out of the yeshiva Frei. Still totally. You could have walked out of the yeshiva Stark Sephardi, because they had a whole Sephardi division with a Sephardi staff. My class, I think, was probably 80, 90 guys.
Wow. Okay.
Maybe less, maybe 60, 70. So you could walk out Frei. You can walk out super Sephardi. Actually, at some point I started davening in the Sephardi minyan because it was Nusach Ari and Nusach Ashkenaz are really, really different. Edut HaMizrach is much more similar to Nusach Ari. Then you could walk out super Zionist, or you could walk out super Litvish. I'm saying I have friends from that year that are all over the place. Frei, super Sephardi, super Zionist, like army, because the yeshiva is very Zionist. Mm-hmm. The premise of the yeshiva is very Zionist, but so you have army Zionists, you have super Litvish guys that went to Shar Yashuv, and guys that went to the Mir, like everything in between. I was already walking into yeshiva that year. I was already an anomaly because I came. So the yeshiva has two main rules, besides for other rules like no drinking and partying and a lot of other structural rules that every place that has a bunch of 18-year-olds should have. Two main rules were: no, you cannot have a beard, and you cannot go black and white. Now, the reason why that was a rule is because not everybody that goes into the yeshiva not giving two hoots about anything in Yiddishkeit, Pneumius, Chitzonius, whatever. Everyone, we're talking about the modern Orthodox system. Most of the guys that are graduating the system are disinterested from Judaism. Going to yeshiva a year after high school is what either decides either saves them or doesn't. But everyone went into that year from the most Orthodox schools to the least Orthodox schools. Everyone went in there wanting to have a good time, wanting to get away from home, wanting to not really being interested in learning. A lot of guys didn't even know how to read Hebrew, right? Not interested in anything. They had to get interested, right? So it was literally, these yeshivas are like yeshivas for Bali Tshuva, except for they don't want to admit that they're Bali Tshuva.
So why do they go there if they're not interested? Their parents force them?
It's social. It's a social thing. You are a failure. In that system, you're a failure if you don't go to yeshiva or seminary a year after high school.
Mm-hmm.
It's unheard of. It's like today, if you don't graduate high school, go to college,
But why did you go there again? Because you were already out of that.
I wasn't out of that, so I was straddling that. So I wasn't ready socially to completely cut off and say, okay, that's it. I'm jumping into the Lubavitch system, and that's it. Also, because I wanted to go to Israel for the year. So there's two things. So we went into that year. So, like I said, no. So the reason why the no beard and no black and white rule exists is because they don't want Bachram in the middle of the year flipping out and then going crazy and smoking Judaism and then coming back home and losing it all, right? So it's a very, very good rule. In fact, I think it's fundamental for a place that is dealing with this kind of chevra. Because these kind of chevra can all of a sudden get super excited about Yiddishkeit, but it's very ratzoi, there's no shuv. It can become very, very unsustainable. The only exception to the rule, which it's funny, it's not an official exception to the rule, but it was a known thing that that you're not allowed to have a beard, you're not allowed to go black and white. If you came into the yeshiva, you're wearing black and white, they would tell you like, we're sorry, like this is maybe just not be the place for you. So I went to Israel that year with cheder blue shirts. Thought, okay, if I can't do black and white, I'll do Lubavitcher kids. They all wear blue shirts. So I wear light blue shirts every day, no colored shirts. That was it, done. Mm-hmm. And I also came in with a beard. So there was a famous Thursday night Musar shmooze that Rosh Yeshiva gave, where it was right before it was right after Ben Azman and Sukkot. Everyone was kind of out for a week, and everyone came back in, and he says, everyone get your hair cut, shave your faces, except for the Lubavitcher from Pittsburgh. So I had my hechsher to do what I to do, and I had a great year. I learned a lot. I learned how to learn. I learned how to learn Gemara. I learned how to put together, to string together, be able to understand anything written in a sefer. I'm saying I'm coming from a place where I barely knew how to read Hebrew with Nekudes. So I was crunching. I have notebooks filled with just my own written translations of words. I would go word for word in the Gemara, word for word in Tanya. I would sit on the phone with the rabbi from Pittsburgh once a week on Thursday. He would be in the car driving somewhere, and I would be with him reading a sikha in Yiddish. And I was word by word, writing and translating every single word. I had dictionaries. It was awesome. So I learned a lot how to learn. But then I also started to discover much more what it actually means to be a Lubavitcher. And so the more, and again, I was very socially accepted. People would make fun of me. Guys would crack jokes, and sometimes it would be really hurtful. But we were all really good group of guys, and most people got along.
Didn't make fun of you that you were the Lubavitcher.
They did make fun of me, and sometimes it was painful, but it was okay. I'm saying, I became, in the years after, I'm if any of these guys meet a Lubavitcher anywhere, the first thing they'll ask you, oh, you know Shmuel Neft? I get regards from these guys years later. A lot of these guys, a bunch of these guys came from families that were in this kind of to Yiddishkeit through Lubavitch, which is which is a great thing. I'm saying, and Bichlal, throughout high school, I met.
You're saying that they start off at Lubavitch, but then they go off their own there.
No, they weren't Lubavitchers to begin with. They became religious. They became religious. They started sending their kids to whatever local Jewish school, which there's no local Lubavitch school that fits a person that's right. So there are a lot of, in Cleveland, for example, a lot of Lubavitch Mikuravim send their kids to Mizrahi day school.
You're saying that as a fact, or as a problem, it's good, or it's just
it is what it is.
Neutral.
It is what it is. Yeah. So a lot of kids have a certain affinity for Lubavitch because of that, and that those are the kids that, because they know Lubavitch from their childhood, they're not the ones making fun of Lubavitch. The ones that don't are the ones that are just ignorant. Mm-hmm. So here's where I'll tell you exactly where things changed. The first Elzman, we were kind of easing into yeshiva. So we were easing into yeshiva. It wasn't like a full seder. It was a full day, but not a full night. So in that yeshiva, night seder ends at 11 o'clock. Wow. Okay, there was no night at the beginning. Yes, at the beginning of the year, there was no night seder at all, and then it started incrementally becoming later and later. Okay, so there's also no seder chassidus in the morning, right? So you just wake up straight from bed to chakras at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay, so whatever. It's still a little more, but I think the breaks were longer. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We were easing into it, and so I felt I was, I was getting into the system with everybody else, and so I didn't feel, I was not necessarily comfortable to maybe bend the rules or do things my own way. I had my own thing already. I was a Lubavitcher guy that didn't shave, that wore a specific certain color shirt every day. I learned Tanya. I learned the Rebbe Sichas. I only started learning Sichas when I got to Israel. Before that, I never did. Right? But I
why?
Never had a chance. It's very hard to start learning a lot when you're not used to. Not used to learning.
You were learning it in a non-Chabad yeshiva, so how did you?
No, what do you mean? I wanted to. I just never had time to. Right? I wanted to, so I finally had it. I finally was in yeshiva. It was all I did was learn Torah now. Mm-hmm. Right? So the first month as we were easing into things, I didn't feel on a comfort level to be able to kind of bend the rules in any way. When we had the first off Shabbos that we had, I went to Tzemach Tzedek in the old city. She was in the old city. I lived in the old city for a year, by the way. I went to Tzemach Tzedek in the old city, Old Lubavitch Shul. Friday night was underwhelming. It was like kama minyan there because everyone goes to the Kesel. At that point, I already lived. The yeshiva is next to the Kesel. In other words, you look out the yeshiva window, onto Har Bayis. Okay?
What's the name?
In Tivarye. So the first off Shabbos I saw it. So whenever I had an off Shabbos, officially there was no structure. So I would go, I would go to the closest Lubavitch shul and would dive in there or whatever. And I didn't really fit in very much because it was all older Balabatim and other characters because it's Yerushalayim. But then, so we had yeshiva. Yeshiva was in for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah there is excruciating. Excruciating because you start davening at 7:30, you finish davening at 4. Okay, with a break between Shachris and Tekiyas, with break for Kiddush. So you actually make Kiddush in the middle. Don't even. I don't want to go there because I don't know who's going to be watching this. Yom Kippur was a 40-minute break from Musaf to Mincha.
Wow.
Okay, that's after starting at 7 in the morning. So the first day of Rosh Hashanah, I suffered through it. But we got, after shul ended, we were all hanging out. The Sephardi Chavra were like, oh, we went to the Sephardi shul. There's this famous Sephardi shul in the old city. They start at 7:30, but they finish at 2. So I told myself, 1 second. So Sephardi Nusach is what I'm more used to, Nusachari, and it's also less time davening. Great. I went with the Sephardi. I went with the Sephardi guys on second day of Rosh Hashanah.
You were allowed to.
Not necessarily.
Okay, that's.
So that's when I started to push the bill a little bit. So one of the teachers in yeshiva commented, "Oh, you became a Sephardi all of a sudden." So my excuse was the nusach, and it really was the nusach Ashkenaz until today throws me off, let alone back then. But then it was Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot was off, but Simchas Torah was back in yeshiva. Mind you, I was keeping one day of Yom Tov. That I got a heter for. A bunch of guys in yeshiva weren't keeping one day. Most of the yeshiva was keeping 2 days. But I asked one of the local Lubavitch through somebody and got the answer that I wanted, which is 1 day. So it's funny. I would go second day Yom Tov. We went to second day Yom Tov, first day Sukkot. We went to one of these fancy hotels where all these 5 towns rich American Jews come to spend Yom Tov, and I was the Shabbos guy for everybody. I was taking them up and down the elevator. It's very funny.
Why did you do that?
Why? Because I was the guy. All my friends were keeping 2 days, but I was keeping 1 day. It was
So why that job? Why were you just the Shabbos guy?
Because I could. Why should you walk up the stairs if you have someone that could push that button for the elevator for you?
Right. Okay.
And it's totally. Besides the fact that being in the elevator itself is an issue, doing malacha for someone that's keeping 2 days is totally fine. The point is like this: Simchas Torah came about. Simchas Torah was strictly in yeshiva. That was what we were told. Sukkot Ben Azmanim ended out of Simchas Torah. Mind you, in high school, I grew up going to Chabad for Simchas Torah, and then I would spend Simchas Torah. 1 year I spent Simchas Torah in the Lubavitch community in Pittsburgh. Another time I spent Simchas Torah in Cleveland, where I ended up spending, because I was Halzach Lubavitch already. I was davening. I was hanging out with my NCSY friends, but I was davening in the Lubavitch Center. I actually got really, both times I got really, said a lot of l'chaim. Both the time I was in Pittsburgh and at the time I was in Cleveland. But that was for me Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah that's Simchas Torah. Nothing else. Like in Cleveland, for example, all the shuls in the main Jewish community are all in the same. Basically the same, they all share the same parking lot. So I would at some point, I spent the entire time davening in Lubavitch shul. My friends would come in and like, hey, what are you doing? Come with us. And we'd go to the modern Orthodox shul, and it felt like mom was like coming down. It was like, whoa, take me back. I want to go back to real Simchas Torah. Like, I can't, this is not, so it was Simchas Torah night, Shmini Atzeres night. Well, it's 1 day in Eretz Yisrael, right? We all go to where the yeshiva was davening for a kafis, and literally, as soon as the Aron Kodesh opened, I was like, I can't do this. I walked out, which was like a punishable offense. Like, you were not allowed to go anywhere. Everyone was supposed to be there, right? I couldn't have gotten in a lot of trouble. But I just I can't do this. I walked out. I went to Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek was rolling. It was rolling.
Nice to
This is,
hear.
by the
It's
way-
probably the one day a year that they're on fire.
No, Bichlal, but you should know, by the way, for the Shabbos day for bringing over there is really geschmack. Avram Yuzevich is Zayda is the Gabbai. He brings stark there every Shabbos. An old man now, but he's quite a character. And back then, Adin Steinsaltz was still alive, and he was davening there. So between the two of them, it was quite geschmack.
Wow.
And I actually sat at the same table with Adin Steinsaltz when I would go daven there in the mornings. So I escaped to Tzemach Tzedek, and I went over there, and it was beyond. It was beyond. And I was like, okay, this is Simchas Torah. Finished there. I was saying, so we said, verbranged in the sukkah, said plenty of l'chaim, came back in for hakafes, finished hakafes, went to bed. Pashat hoping that no one noticed that I was gone. Came back to the dorm. Nothing was. No one batted an eye. I think everyone was asleep, or whatever it was. I came back to the dorm. Everything was fine. Also not allowed to drink, by the way, in yeshiva. So drinking also was a problem.
On Simchas Torah, you can't drink?
No, there's no drinking in Simchas Torah. The only people that drink on Simchas Torah are the Lubavitchers. Fact.
Wow.
There was no drinking. There was no drinking in yeshiva. The only time you could drink in yeshiva, that yeshiva, was on Purim. Now it happens to be the only exception to that rule. If you could have wine to make kiddush on Friday nights if it was an off Shabbos. We took advantage of that rule. We used to a bunch of us would buy wine, and then we would sit down and sit in the dark corner in the back of the dorms. And mind you, the dorms are in the old city. So in the old city, all the buildings are built like old palaces, with different crevices and different places, and very randomly built.
Yeah.
So we go hide away in the deepest corner of the dorms. Everyone would take down a bottle of wine on a Friday night after the Shabbos meal. It was great.
Only Kiddush, or Kiddush is on grape juice? Like what?
No, Kiddush was, in yeshiva, Kiddush was officially on grape juice, but if the official exception was you could have wine to make Kiddush in the dorms if it was an off Shabbos and there was no official meal.
That's very interesting. I just wanted to focus on that. Like it's crazy.
There's no party. You're not allowed to party. No, you're not allowed to. So that's why this yeshiva is considered one of the strictest.
Just to kind of go. Well, we can go back to this, but like just comparing it to Chabad yeshiva, I feel like we make a big deal. Oh, how come? I mean, there's yeshivas that allow mashke, but it's only up to 4, obviously, like what the Rebbe wants. And unfortunately, there are yeshivas that even allow more than 4, whatever. But it's passively, they just let it go. So like that's great. I didn't know that.
No, it's not about alcohol. Is not part of their culture. That's number one. Number two, for better for worse, Purim is the only time you could drink is in Purim, and only wine. No hard alcohol. In other words, according to the yeshiva rule books, you cannot touch hard alcohol the entire year you're there. Now, the reason being is not because of a religious thing or not a religious thing. It's because alcohol for modern Orthodox kids, alcohol is synonymous with partying. And the truth is that a lot of the chaver that today are very, very, very frum back then when they were struggling big time, and on their off Shabbos and they'd go away to Tel Aviv together, rent an apartment, and have big parties with lots of alcohol and other things, which I was quite appalled at. But I digress. There was no alcohol allowed in yeshiva because it was about a party thing. So
it really depends on the culture. Like for one culture, it could be really good, and another culture, it's really bad. 100%. It's a neutral thing.
100%. That's why modern Orthodox kids love to go to Chabad or anybody loves to go to Chabad. Any teenager likes to go to Chabad on Simchas Torah because they think that they'll get away with drinking whatever they want.
So it's but it's all about like their intention is more party.
Exactly? So that's the why alcohol was banned. So just drinking alcohol was itself a yarig v'layaver in that yeshiva. Anyway, the next morning I woke up. Obviously, after Simchas Torah by night at Tzemach Tzedek, there's no way that I was not going to go back there for Simchas Torah during the day. Went back there, 10 o'clock Shachris. Shachris breaks. We go downstairs to the Kiddush room, make Kiddush. Bekitzer, I took way too much mashke. Way too much. At some point, some of my friends walked in there and they're like, "Hey, we finally found you. Where have you been?" And I was gone. But then, I was totally gone. So at some point, I don't remember anymore. So I vaguely remember hakafes, and I vaguely remember breching in the bathroom. But then that night I woke up. I was already Matzah Yom Tov. I woke up in the Kiddush room, and Tzemach Tzedek. And which is actually not downstairs; it's upstairs in Tzemach Tzedek. I woke up, and I barely hoofed it back to my dorm, which was just a half a block down the road, and had a mini anxiety attack, thinking that at this point that I'm screwed, that someone for sure knows that I was gone, and for sure knows that I was out drinking, and then not in yeshiva, and then drinking, so I was for sure screwed. And then I woke up the next morning. It was Matzah Yom Tov for me. It was still Yom Tov for a bunch of other guys, and I felt like crap. I was wildly hungover. I'm saying this is all bad. Like, it's not good to get drunk like this, but it happened. And I'm 18 years old. I lost control. What do you want? But
could it be possibly because you were in a culture still in the modern Orthodox culture, which drinking is not good? So it's almost like you went from one extreme to the other extreme.
Right. Yeah, it was a good time, and also like you lose count and whatever. Anyway, if I woke up in the morning feeling crappy, that entire next day was a write-off, but no one said anything, so I realized maybe 24 hours later that I got away with it, which is kind of cool. So that was the first time that I started creating my own Seder and started gravitating towards doing things on my own frequency. And the long story short is, I was at every Seder. I was always in yeshiva. I was always learning. I grew a lot that year, but at the same time, I gravitated further and further and further away from them, and ended up at some point in the year basically running my own show, because no one was protesting, and this was what I wanted. I basically, which is completely against what the yeshiva, the way the yeshiva operated, and what anyone, the kind of preconceived notions of how the yeshiva worked. I completely created my own Seder, and no one batted an eye about it.
Why do you think that is?
At first I thought that it was because they were ignoring it, but I think it not ignoring it, they didn't realize. I was very quiet about what I would do, and I'll tell you exactly what I was doing in a second. Then I realized, I think later on in the year, they realized that I'm not their quintessential student. I'm not coming back the next year, whereas they're trying to get other guys to come for a second year. This is the way I'm going, and that's the way it is. And again, it wasn't coming from a bad place. It was coming from a very, very good place. What happened is like this. I got special rishus to wear a white shirt on Yudas Kislev. I also got special rishus on Yudas Kislev to leave yeshiva, leave Seder in yeshiva, and go to Farbrengen. So what I did was I met up with this other guy who's actually now a shliach also. His name is David Goldschmidt. It's actually a guy he grew up in Chicago. Also, in very, very cool story in Baal Tshuva, and then was in NZSY, and was very involved in C-Teen, and he was also in the day, he went to Jewish day school, and B'Kitzer, he was also in a non-Lubavitch yeshiva, so we both got rishus from our yeshivas to go to Farbrengen for Yutas Kislev. So we met up in Yerushalayim, in the center of town. He's now a shliach in Atlanta, Georgia, married with kids. He had a big C-Teen chapter. He's a really good dude. We actually ended up spending a summer in Yeka a few years later, together. He's very, very good at what he does. He's very good with teens. You know David at all? No. Okay. Shout out David. We met up together. We decided we're going to go to the rap. You know the rap?
As a student or?
No, to Farbrengen. Went to the rap to Farbrengen. And
when is this?
By the Kislev.
Okay, going back to
went to the rap. We want to go to Farbrengen for the Kislev. I think we went to the rap because he wanted to go there. And so we. Oh no, maybe it was because I wanted to go to the rap. He wanted to go to Mayanot. So I said, let's go to the rap and see what it's like, and then we'll see what we're. So we went to the rap. The rap. I was shocked. I didn't realize what the rap was. The rap was, the rap. And all the mashka was gone in 20 minutes, and the place was a madhouse. And Rabbi Afton was trying to keep the place in check and trying to bring with everybody, but man, is it a wild house over there. At some point, I was like, okay, let's go, because like it was not what I was looking for at all. And then we went to Minot, which was not far away. They're not far away from each other. I went to Minot and walked into Minot, and Minot's popping for like on fire. Like place is filled with all the buckle from Minot, plus all the people that came to bring in Minot. There was standing room only. There was nowhere to sit. Is it still? Oh yeah, it's still going. 53, another 50, almost 2 hours in.
Yeah.
So we went to Minot. There was no the Farbrengen was the Nigunim and the Farbrengen were fantastic. This is what I was looking for. In other words, young chevra, lively place, Chassidischkeit, and it was really, really cool. But I didn't know anybody, which felt very uncomfortable. So I ended up. So David Goldschmidt, he knew a guy that was this guy, Shalom Goldman, who's also a character, also from Chicago. So he was like, oh, they knew each other. So Shalom took him and sat him down. And I ended up standing over there by myself, feeling very, very, very uplifted of being at that Farbrengen, but feeling very lonely at the same time. Because I didn't know anybody, and I felt very out of place. And then someone points out to me, oh, like in the middle of the room over there, there's an empty seat. Go sit down. So I sat down, and sat down. All of a sudden, the guy, I think he was sitting to the left of me, and turns to me and says, "What's your name?" Shmuel Neft. What's your deal? I told him like where I'm learning, where I'm from. This guy's name is Shmuel Steiner. He's a shliach here in Toronto now. I ended up telling him about my life, and telling him what I'm up to, and what I'm doing, and whatever.
So he was a shliach there.
He was a shliach there that year, yeah. I ended up having a great conversation, and the Farbrengen was amazing. And he says to me, you know what? You want to learn once a week? Yeah, let's do it. So that's when I started That's when I started skipping night seder. No, that's when I started. Yes. Okay. So here's the way. Say the yeshiva worked that. Basically, Thursday night mishmar. So there was a long dinner break, and then the seder would officially went until 1:00, and then 1:00 would be the shiva's shmooze, but seder would only start at like 10:00 or 10:30. So Thursday nights was perfect. I would have dinner, quickly eat dinner, grab a bus from the old city, get in the bus from the old city to my note, or the bus or the train, sit with him, learn for an hour, and then come back and still make it the seder. So that's what I started doing. And that was the first time I learned the Maimer of the Rebbe. Basi Legani Tavshin Tesvav. Yeah, Tesvav. Yeah. And then every Thursday, after Thursday, and then it was, I spent Shabbos Heitevis. I went there, Shabbos Heitevis. I walked there Shabbos morning. It was an off Shabbos, so it was no one cared. You do whatever you want. So I walked there. It was a 40 or 35 minute walk. And Shabbos Heitevis I spent there until Havdalah. Amazing. And then Thursdays, and then it's shortly after that I realized I'm not interested in being here on Shabbos. So then it became every Shabbos I was walking there. And Av Shabbosim.
Did you ask permission?
No, Av Shabbosim and in Shabbosim. In other words, in Shabbosim I made sure to be there Friday night with yeshiva with everybody else. Shabbos morning, even though Seder Yeshiva was to be in yeshiva, I was gone. First time I did it, no one noticed. Great. I'd walk back after Havdalah. Because nothing happened. And then it turned into going. Then once or twice I went there and stayed the whole Shabbos. And so basically, And then it turned into Thursday nights being, I would basically go there for a few hours and then only show up really late to yeshiva to say there. I would never miss the Rosh Hashanah every Thursday night because it was very, very, very fun to be to come and listen to. But I ended up Thursday nights learning there for a few hours. And so I would break my head with Shmuel Steiner once a week and learn Chassidus. And then at that point, a little over midway through the year, is when I realized that I'm not going to Yeshiva University next year. It's not happening.
Instead,
so I decided to myself that I'm going to go to Lubavitch Yeshiva next year. Exactly which yeshiva I wasn't sure. I was debating, and I was really and at that point, it had basically become so close. Basically, there's a really great group of shluchim in my note that year, and so I basically ended up hanging out with them. So I basically got very, very quickly mainstreamed. So I really did not want to go into a Baal Tshuva yeshiva. So I was actually convinced at one point that I wanted to go to Chayei Torah. Parents ended up being very against, and I'm very happy they were. But the kids, I basically.
How were they against specifically Chayei?
Because the rabbi told them that Chayei is in Crown Heights, and it wouldn't be a really good idea. And it's true. I would have been really, really lost if I had gone to Chayei.
Right. So it wasn't about Chayei per se. It was just the fact that it was in Crown Heights, which is a lot of people say that.
Yeah. I didn't want to go to my note, even though I loved my note. I did not want to be in a Baal Tshuva yeshiva. I wanted to be with everybody else. So I basically prepared an entire written argument that I made a special time to call my parents and talk to them about how I was planning on changing my mind again. And I wrote it all out, and I prepared myself for like a few weeks, and they were still super upset. But because I did it away from the Sudar, and they realized that I was serious, that they went with it. And that's it. I decided to go to Morristown the year after. That was where I landed up.
So in Morristown, you were in the regular so-called section.
I was supposed to go. I wanted to go to Tamim. I called. So that year, Morristown. After that year, Morristown had a huge shakeup, and Chaim Shapiro became the Manal of Morristown, and changed. The yeshiva went through a whole cycle of like cleaning up basically, and he took charge and changed things around. And I called him myself. And I said, this is my situation, so I'm coming from. I really want to join, and I really, really don't want to go to Tiferes Bachorim, which is the Baal Tshuva yeshiva. He said, I don't know you. I don't know where you're coming from. I'm new, so I'd rather you go to Tiferes Bachorim, and then transition up if you feel like you want to. That's what ended up being what I did. I was in Tiferes Bachorim, but I really, really hated it. So I was out of there very quickly.
Can we speak about that? Why? What is it that you really...
I was never into being a Baal Tshuva.
Why?
Not my personality. Maybe it's the genuine thing where like, very like... It was always very down to earth.
Baal Tshuvas are more genuine, usually.
They're more genuine, but then they get caught up in all this spirit. Maybe it's because I'm not like, I don't have that Baal Tshuva like spiritual smoking Judaism, attitude where like I'm a very straight shooter, and it's I'm not gonna
you're more practical, if you can say that.
More practical, and also like more down to earth. A lot of these Baal Tshuvas, when they go to their Baal Tshuva yeshivas, they're in this echo chamber of very excited about Yiddishkeit and whatever, very disconnected from Elam Haza, and I was never like that.
What is the motivating factor for you becoming religious? Although it was gradual through many years.
Meaning in life.
Meaning in life. It's so interesting. Like, I don't know if I've even met another Baal Tshuva like that. Usually Baal Tshuvas are like what you described. They're very spiritual. Like,
No. And I'm plenty. I can be plenty spiritual, although it's not necessarily my natural state of whatever. But I was never into that. I'm a Baal Tshuva, and like super really. I was hanging out in my notes, but I very, very quickly gravitated towards the shluchim versus the bakrim. And so, like I said, because hanging around with them, I got very, very much integrated into Lubavitch culture and Lubavitch sprach. Then I spent that summer so there's 1-2 punch was that, and by Shkach Pratis, the Bachner that was running Camp Yaka that summer was also in Eretz Yisrael, and we actually ended up meeting, and we got together for coffee one night, and basically I really wanted to go to the camp because I really wanted to have this shlichus experience, and I also partly knowing that these are all mainstream Lubavitch Bachrim, the guys that I want to be around. So I ended up spending the summer with a bunch of ragtag mainstream Lubavitch Bachrim, which back then I after that summer I felt like this was the closest, most genuine friend group I had ever had. Really, like guys that like the first time where after spending a month with people, I really did not want to separate from them. It was a really, really tight knit group, and everyone was really got along really well, and it was all really good guys. And the tainug that I got when I would see friends from camp later on after the summer, I never felt before with other friends. Like it was and it, also because they accepted me. I was an outsider. Was it
like random? Could you pinpoint something? Why is that you felt so close with them?
I don't know. First of all, in general, when you work in stressful situations, it brings people together. That's number one. Number two is when we're all in this one enclosed space together, removed from the rest of the world. It also brings you together. It's also just everyone that ends up going to that camp is of a very similar character. Not the typical oivdim. Although we had some guys in that group that were really chassidish bachrim, but not the regular oivdim.
But it's a certain personality that goes there. So all those
they're not They're not the guys that are going to yeshivas kites in their zal years. Okay, these are guys that are bouncing off the wall, untreated ADHD, borderline alcoholism, whatever. Every guy's different. A lot of these guys back then were like really ragtag, but today are like really put together shluchim, mechanchim, good dudes, good guys. It just felt like a very, very good, genuine group of people. I don't know. It felt really good. I felt very accepted, even though I knew nobody, and I came from outside of the system. It was the first time that I had guys drilling certain chassidish hanachas in my head that I was not able to really swallow. The idea of Nasi Adar and Mashiach and all these things that my Mishnah head wasn't really fully into accepting yet. At that point, like for me, like you go to camp and you daven without a minyan, that felt weird because I was used to being in a place where if you don't daven with a minyan, don't daven at all, kind of mentality, which is true, by the way. In Litvish stream in general, in the stark Litvish stream, after Zman Tefillah, says Zman Tefillah, do not daven chakras anymore. You are not supposed to daven chakras. Forget chatzais. After Seis Man Tefillah, there was not a minyan left in the old city of Yerushalayim. The last minyan in town was maybe 9 o'clock. No, by the Kesel it was 8 o'clock. There's one minyan factory in the old city. It's called Ramban. 9 o'clock was the latest minyan chakras.
Wow.
Okay? So whatever. So I got very much acclimated. But after that summer, to come to Baal Sheva Yeshiva was like, whoa, no. It was very, very fast that I realized that I really, really did not like it there.
Where is this again?
Morristown.
Oh, so he said you still have to go back to
So he told me then that go to Tiferes, get kind of assimilate into the system, and then we'll see what happens. And he for himself forgot about it when I came to him half a year into the school year. Maybe 4 months into the school year, he didn't know who I was. Like I was like, oh yeah, I called you a year ago. Like.
It's not so good that he's not really in touch. Like,
why is he supposed to be in touch with a bacher that's not in his yeshiva? He had.
Why are you contacting him in the first place?
Because he's the manal of the yeshiva I wanted to get into. I didn't get into the yeshiva. Why should he know who I was?
Oh, so it's two separate manal. Okay.
Yeah. No. I'm not talking about. No,
I'm not so familiar. That's
yeah. No, I'm talking about the Morristown. Got into Tiferes. I was getting into this. What I did enjoy was learning say the chassidus in the morning, say the chassidus in the evening, and having people that generally were like-minded and Lubavitchers. And also see, the problem with going to one of the current existing Lubavitcher Baal Tshuva yeshivas is that most of the guys there are already in their 20s. I was 19 years old. All the guys my age were in Zal.
Right.
So, there was no one my age there. So I felt
Right.
very, very out of place. So I had one friend that was from Camp Yaka that was in the Smicha program there that year. So I would try to spend time around him. But as time went on, I was gravitating more towards the Techetim, and I was getting to know a lot of the Bachrim there. And they were, again, accepting and very, cool. And I got, got to know them. And at some point, I went on Merkashlichus for Hanukkah. I came back and I couldn't walk into Tiferes anymore. By the way, you've heard this a few times already. There's a certain point where I no longer can bring myself to do something I don't like, that I don't believe in. I have this on Shlichus also. I think it's a great trait. It's about it's about pushing yourself beyond the boundaries of what the world could tell you what you should and should not do.
So over here, how does
Over here, you have the entire the world looks at you and you're a Baal Tshuva, you're new, you're fresh. What do you belong doing in a yeshiva? A bunch of Lubavitchers that have been in the system for their entire lives,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's conventional wisdom, but I defied that by basically at some point I couldn't bring myself to walk in there anymore, and I basically staged a silent strike where I just was not showing up there anymore. Instead, I would go to him and learn there, do my own thing. I was hoping no one was going to notice. And they started to notice, but I didn't care anymore. I went to the hall of Timothy. I said, I want to get in. That's it. I'm here. A little bit of back and forth. And all in all, I moved up. I moved out of my dorm room in Tiferes. I moved into the Zal dorm. I turned my iPhone off. I had an iPhone then in yeshiva. In Tiferes, you can have a smartphone, right? It's a Baal Tshuva yeshiva. I bought a dumb phone, and I willingly put away my iPhone. No one asked me where is it? Can they have it? Give your phone in. Nothing. I on my own put away my phone, and I wouldn't touch it. I even once went to Crown Heights. I went to Crown Heights that year for Yud Shvat. I didn't even bring my smart. Everyone else brings their smartphones when yeshiva goes out, right? I left mine in Morristown. I was all in. And that's it. From that moment on, I was a typical mainstream Lubavitcher Bacher.
You chose it.
But I wanted it. I wanted it really, really bad. And that's why those years in the 2 years in Morristown were the best years of my life, because those years formed me. If it weren't for those 2 years, I wouldn't have a derech. I wouldn't be on shlichus. I wouldn't have a derech. I wouldn't have those 2 years, like all besides the learning, which itself is fantastic. The Farbrengens, the Chassidische Dvarim B'Teilim, the shlichus opportunities, and Chanukah, Purim, Pesach, whatever it was. At that point. At that point, I was going on Merkashlichus for Pesach, and then went on Merkashlichus in the summer, and then from Merkashlichus straight into Camp Yaka to Ukraine, and straight from Camp Yaka right back to Morristown. Spent a whole 2.5 or 3 weeks of that summer in Pittsburgh, maybe less than 3 weeks in Pittsburgh. It was I couldn't stand it. That's beside the fact that Sukkot was by the Rebbe. So the entire Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah I would come home, go back to yeshiva for Seis Meit Tshuva, come back home for Yom Kippur, go, and then from Pittsburgh fly to New York and spend Gan Sukkot in New York. Pesach, the entire thing was on Merkashlichus. The summer I would go home for 2.5 weeks. My mother picked me up after my first year in Morristown, went home for a couple of weeks, and then I was gone again on Merkashlichus. So I flew to New York, and then from New York I flew to Kazakhstan and spent the summer in Kazakhstan. From Kazakhstan to Ukraine for camp, and then literally from camp straight back to Morristown. Right, all my stuff was there. I was elated to go back. Another year, Sukkot by the Rebbe, Hanukkah. We went to Philadelphia we got the Rishus to go to Philadelphia for the entire Hanukkah. Pesach back to Kazakhstan for the entire Pesach for Megar Shlichus, summer Megar Shlichus in Kazakhstan, and then went on Shidduchim in Ukraine and met my wife. That's where my sojourn in the system came to a pretty quick end.
Why is it an end? Because you became a balabas?
No, not because of that. Because I got married, so I didn't go on shlichus after yeshiva. I got married half a year after Shir Daled, so like you did. Yeah. So I skipped shlichus. I met my wife. I went to 770. I was learning smicha in. I can't get that, unfortunately. I was in smicha in Chayuvei, but I consider myself learning in 770. In fact, I was in the Chayuvei program for Elul, and then right after Hashanah I got engaged, and then until my wedding in Kislev, I was still in Chayuvei for a couple months, but I was like, already kind of chatzi out of it. But the friends that I ended up meeting in Chayuvei Smicha are some of my best friends today, which is very funny. So we had an apartment in Crown Heights where a bunch of the guys. Some know, like some guys are like a couple random guys that I'm no longer in touch with, but I have two really, really good friends that lived in that apartment with me. Adiyim, they're two of my best friends. And yeah, so from there I ended up getting married, and then I didn't really leave the system that quickly, because then I got married and went to Kilo, but the Kilo is a completely different world already. But I went into Kilo, and Kilo was amazing, and then I went to work, and then not long after I was already here, and that's basically the story. It's a story of. It's basically I basically got what I wanted.
Yeah.
Out of life.
It's a nice.
And I'm very, very unashamed. I'm very, very unabashed. I'm very, very proud of myself. I don't have very many talents. I'm not a singer. I'm not a prolific writer. I'm not a lamdan. I'm not. But I'm a person who, if I want to get something, accomplish something, I'll do it. I will do it if I really, really, really want it.
That's a huge trait.
It's Baruch Hashem. I'm saying it's why I'm on. At some point, I made it. It's going into Yeshiva in Morristown. I was all in this. I was all in for the system. I was all in for whatever was gonna come my way. But I was not planning on going to shlichus. I'll be a balabas, whatever, working business, whatever I was gonna do. I wasn't thinking so much of the future, but I was not going to shlichus. Then at some point, something switched also, and I made a decision that it's not about if. It was, first of all, it was no, and then it was if, and then it was when I go on shlichus, right? And despite all odds, I guess.
Why did you change your mind?
First of all, is Bichlal, the development that the yeshiva system gives you as a Chassidish Yid, as a Chassid. In other words, shlichus is the backbone of the entire, is really the backbone of our entire chinuch. Starting from the fact that we all went on Mitzvah on Fridays, to the fact that in my off time, instead of going home, I didn't want to go home, so I had to do something, so I went on shlichus, right? What it really was seeing certain shluchim in action, where I looked at that and I said, this is what I want to live my life. The idea of giving your life over to somebody.
But it changed in that year.
It changed in that year.
So it was just like the general chinuch, I guess, learning about it.
Talk. It's all we're talking about.
Right.
All
the last year of yeshiva, they all talk about shlichus. It's
not, well, that's just Bachram shlichus, but bichlal, the idea of shlichus is the entire. That's our hiskashus today. You know what I mean? And right, the Rebbe says that very clearly, that shlichus is part of our Yiddishkeit as a yesod. So no matter where you are in life and where you are in your Yiddishkeit, shlichus still remains a yesod. There are people that go on full-time shlichus, and there are people that go on other places, but their tafkid is still to be a shliach, just in a different realm. But I decided that I will be going on shlichus. That was a resolute decision that I made at some point, because again, it's it's that for me was meaningful. It was meaningful to see that there are people in the world that their entire lives are dedicated to others.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think we've definitely hit the time limit over here. So,
all right. Thank you, Shmuel, for your time.
I'm the one kicking you off your own podcast.
No, every interview, the other person has to go. But that was a long time. What was it? 2.5 hours?
Almost 3 hours, yeah.
Almost 3 hours. Chazak.
Thank you.
And any last words you want to tell the Chabad religious?
Everybody is a shliach. That's the point. Every person that listens to this is a shliach in some way. And you are, wherever context in life you are in, you not you have the opportunity, you're obligated to be on shlichus, whatever it is. I'm saying if it's you doing what you do, you're teaching kids, or if it's you're whoever's listening to this, it's in the business world or in the working world or in service, whatever it is, your shlichus is there, and it has to be it's got to be a shlichus. It's got to be finding a way to spread to spread Yiddishkeit.
Wow, chazak.
Thank you. Thank you
All
for having me.
right. So subscribe, like, comment, and share again if you haven't. And l'chaim, Mashiach now.
All right.